We continue to look at the shots fired in the Jfk assassination and the Warren Commission's first thin thread holding their lone assassin theory together, their single bullet theory. I don't know what to say other than they talk about people with far out imaginations. How this is the biggest stretch of the imagination one can imagine. But let us continue.
A confrontation over what to do with the president's body?
Oh, the confrontation, that was one of the biggest things that happened at Parkland. That's what caused all of this, not allowing Texas law to be in place. Our pathologist should have done the autopsy at Parkland.
And he tried to.
And he tried to follow the Texas law. And the Secret Service, they looked like a herd of locusts, a phalanx around the coffin. And Mrs. Kennedy was in the middle with her left hand on the casket. And they were then coming out into the hall. And all of a sudden, there, our forensic pathologist stopped them. Dr. Earl Rose said, "Halt. This man has to have an autopsy here in the state of Texas. It'll only take 45 minutes. And they would not hear of it. They wanted to get that body out of Dallas.
Darrow Tomlinson, a Parkland Hospital employee, reenacts how he found that bullet on a stretcher. The bullet was ballistically traced to Oswald's rifle. The Warren Commission concluded that it was the bullet that had wounded both men and that it had fallen out of Connolly's clothing onto his hospital stretcher.
The bullet was found here in this area, and not on that stretcher. That's the stretcher I took off the elevator. And it was
the stretcher he took off the elevator was Connolly's, so Tomlinson found the bullet on a different stretcher not connected to the case. This led critics to claim the bullet was planted. But the commission decided Tomlinson was mistaken.
It was there when I came up.
This is the bullet. Could it look like this after it went through Kennedy's neck and then struck the governor? It was Dr. Robert Shaw.
The bullet struck lateral to the shoulder blade, stripped out approximately 10 centimeters of the fifth rib, driving fragments of the rib into his chest, went on and struck the radius bone of his lower arm at this point, and a small fragment of bullet entered the inner aspect of the lower left thigh. I have never seen a bullet that had caused as much bony damage as you found in the case of Governor Connolly remain as a pristine bullet.
At the National Archives in Washington, Dr. Cyril Wecht, former head of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, examined bullets the Warren Commission had test-fired. To find out if a bullet could break so many bones and remain apparently intact, the commission used a rifle similar to Oswald's.
And then they got these bullets, all 6.5 millimeter. And they test-fired, first into cotton wadding. These two bullets were fired into cotton wadding, striking nothing. You will note that these bullets both have a minimal degree of protrusion of the lead at the base. Otherwise, they are intact, which is what you would expect. The next bullet broke one rib of a goat carcass. Notice, please, it's widening. This bullet struck one of the two large bones that come down from the elbow to the wrist in a human cadaver. They wanted to simulate the fracture of that same bone in Governor Connolly. Please note the substantial deformity. This is classical, typical, when a bullet strikes a dense, heavy bone or some other very firm object. Now, I want you to look at the so-called stretcher bullet. This bullet is the actual bullet that the Warren Commission claims broke both John Connolly's right fifth rib, destroying 4 inches of that bone, pulverizing it, and which caused a comminuted or extensively fragmented fracture of a dense, heavy bone down near the base of the wrist, and emerged in this condition. You will see that it is near pristine. As a matter of fact, its nose, the cone, the sides of the bullet are completely intact and unscathed. It has only minimal protrusion of the lead core at the base, in the same fashion that the 2 bullets did that had been fired in the test wadding. That's from the impact of the firing mechanism.
The conclusive evidence, which completely destroys the Commission's theory, is the fact that more grains of metal were recovered from Governor Connolly's wrist wound alone than could have possibly come from Commission Exhibit 399.
There never again, and never was in the past, in the history of gunfire in civilization, a bullet that did what this bullet is supposed to have done under the single bullet theory. That is the foundation of the whole report. And once you remove that keystone, then the whole thing collapses.
As of the time that bullet reached the FBI laboratory, Robert Fraser is the ballistics examiner who got it. It was almost perfect. It was slightly flattened at the end that is attached to the shell, the back end of the bullet. And it wasn't flattened much, but it was flattened there. Fraser testified to its condition when he received it, when he was a witness before the Warren Commission. And I'm paraphrasing his testimony, but it is roughly this, that if that bullet had struck coarse cloth or leather, he would have expected to find microscopic marks on it, and there were no such microscopic marks.
Well, Dallas is a large city, and there are many gunshot wounds that come into Parkland Memorial Hospital on a regular basis. This is a normal sort of life for a hospital in a big city, and especially Texas, where a lot of people carry guns. And when they looked at President Kennedy and his throat, they immediately concurred that he had been hit by a shot fired from the front.
The Parkland Hospital doctors held a press conference a few moments after the president was officially pronounced dead. At 2 points, Dr. Malcolm Perry said that when, in response to questions he was asked, he said specifically that the wound in the front of the president's neck was a wound of entrance. And each time, his superior, Dr. Champ Clark, confirmed what Dr. Perry said. Now, the simplest way and the easiest way to make a pretty definitive determination is the size of the bullet hole. It almost invariably is true that on entering, the bullet makes the smaller hole. It makes a much larger hole in exiting. The size of the hole measured by Dr. Perry at the hospital was 3 by 5 millimeters. That's quite small. That's actually smaller than the size of the bullet, the diameter of the bullet itself.
The single bullet theory was essential
crucial
to the Commission's case because of a timing conflict between the wounding of the 2 men, as seen on the Zapruder film, and the time needed to operate the bolt-action rifle, which the Commission said Oswald had used.
You'll find out
FBI and Secret Service tests at the assassination site, together with a frame-by-frame examination of the Zapruder film, revealed that President Kennedy and Governor Connolly were wounded within 1.6 seconds of each other. Test with the rifle found in the book depository, however, showed that even in the hands of an expert, the weapon required a minimum of 2.3 seconds to fire 2 shots. Since it was therefore physically impossible for the alleged murder weapon to have been fired twice during the time period in which both the president and the governor were wounded, only 2 possibilities existed. Either both men were hit by the same bullet, or there was a second assassin. The single bullet theory was further necessitated by the commission's conclusion that only 3 shots were fired. One of these shots, though, was known to have missed the limousine entirely, striking a curbstone near the triple underpass. While it was not known which of the 3 shots missed, the commission was...
And therein lies their little problem. The shot that missed wound up way the heck over here. Well, we'll go on.
The single bullet theory was essential to the commission's case because of a timing conflict between the wound. So convincing is the film of the 2 separate shots that both the FBI and the Secret Service reports on the assassination stated that the 2 men were hit by different bullets. Harold Weisberg is a former Senate investigator who has written 6 books on the assassination.
Neither the FBI nor the Secret Service supported the single bullet theory, and as of the last time I saw any of their records that include a reference to it, they were still not sort of laughing about the commission and its single bullet theory. They both agreed in their theories that the first shot hit President Kennedy and nobody else, that the second shot hit Governor Connally and nobody else, and that the third shot hit President Kennedy and nobody else. However, both the Secret Service and the FBI knew very well that a bullet had missed, had struck a curbstone, and a spray of concrete had wounded Jim Tegg. It was on the police radio. The FBI transcribed the police radio tapes. It was on the front page of the Dallas papers the next day. Everybody knew. But they just ignored it because they were determined to insist that there was a single assassin and that it was Lee Oswald.
And you're about to see the little problem with their missed shot.
But unquestionably, when the first shot was fired, I recognized it as a shot. I thought of nothing else but that it was a rifle shot. I turned to my right. I had time to think. I had time to react. And I turned to my right to look back over my right shoulder to see if I could see anything unusual, and particularly to see if I could catch him out of the corner of my eye. Because I immediately thought...
Him, you mean
the president.
The president.
Because I immediately thought of an assassination attempt. The moment I heard the shot, I didn't see anything except just the general blur of waving of people moving, but nothing really unusual. I did not see the president out of the corner of my eye, and I was in the process of turning back to look over my left shoulder, and had about come to the point where I was looking straight forward again when I felt the impact of the bullet that hit me. I am convinced beyond any question of a doubt that the first shot that was fired did not hit me. Then I was hit.
So that's the Warren Commission's little problem. They had a missed shot, and rather than assume that there was more than one assassin, they chose to go after their theory, this improbable theory of a single bullet. When most of the American people felt that the Warren Commission would not leave a stone unturned to find the assassin of the President of the United States, they chose instead to go after this one theory because it was the only way they could keep a single assassin up in the sixth floor of the book depository building. Let's go over this single well, we call it something other than bullet, but single bullet theory. Now, the Warren Commission here is claiming that both men were struck while they were behind the freeway sign. We'll get into the bullets, the medical part here later. And as Governor Connally has stated, he was in the process of turning back to look over his left shoulder, and had about come to the point where he was looking straight forward again when he felt the impact of the bullet that hit him. Also, what occurred to me is that Governor Connally was struck in his right wrist, and I don't want to upset the experts here, but something seemed obvious to me. If he was struck in his right wrist, and actually what the Warren Commission is saying, that both men were hit some point where they were behind the freeway. The Governor Connally suffered a delayed reaction. So he was hit through his chest, his right wrist, and wound up in his by his left knee. And left fragments in his wounds, but he suffered a delayed reaction, they claiming. So like I say, it occurred to me that what you want to look at is the governor's right wrist. So as we see here, as the president reemerges from the sign, he's already clearly been hit. He's already starting to react to his wounds in his throat. Now the governor is struck. Again, watch the right wrist there. There is the moment of impact. One more time. President's already reacting to his wound. About 2:28 or 9, 27:28. That's when Governor Connally is struck. So it's kind of in between. The Warren Commission is saying they were both struck while they were behind the freeway sign. In actuality, the president was struck while he was behind the sign. He's already starting to react to his wounds. And then the governor is struck right here about 28:8. You can clearly watch his right wrist one more time. Right there. Yes, I doubt severely that Governor Connally's right wrist suffered a delayed reaction. In all reality, it was probably Kennedy that suffered a slight delayed reaction, so he was probably wounded. He was probably struck and then started reacting shortly after. Also here, it says Governor Connally viewed the film and testified he was hit between 31 and frames 231 and 234. So he was pretty accurate. But that wasn't good enough for the Warren Commission. They knew that was still a big problem. 228, and also, as you can see, by his own testimony, he was in the process of turning straight forward again when he was hit, and he felt the impact. Exactly what the film shows.
Robert Grodin is a photo optics expert who has spent many years examining the Zapruder film.
Unfortunately, there's a road sign between the lens of the camera and the president at about the time of the first shot, which obliterates the view. So we can't tell exactly when the president was first hit. We do know that by the time his head disappears behind the road sign, it does not appear that he has been hit yet. At frame 225, President Kennedy shows the first signs of being hit. That is, he reemerges from behind the road sign and his hands are coming up toward his throat, being clenched. Governor Connally, on the other hand, doesn't show signs of being hit until frame 237 to 238. We have quite a stretch of time there.
To me, it's rather obvious that the president had been struck before Governor Connally was wounded, because the president was placing his hand up to his throat. And at that time, the governor was showing no signs of any distress that he had been struck in any way. It was just a few frames later that he obviously had been wounded and showed signs that he was in pain.